Good evening. Woo doggy. We are live. We're live here, and this is another Econ Fun After Dark, June 3rd edition. So, in this, I go over Marginal Revolution or any other economic issues going on in the day and open it up. Um, People could come on and join, and we'll discuss and have discussion of economic happenings in the world or other fun facts. But evening, Ms. Goldsby. Good to have you. All right, Alan. Great to see you. Yeah, I have 10 minutes. We'll be here. Good to have you. All right. So, yeah, we go over and discuss uh, things. Might fall asleep. Good. Yeah. I'm sorry. Sorry, my sardonious voice is apt to do that. We got some good ones today, uh, and some not as good ones, but we'll go ahead. We start at the top and just kind of work our ways through. 100 greatest birds names of all times. I went ahead and I clicked on that one. There were some good ones, and these are actual names of like the types of birds. It's not really economic, but hey, it's kind of silly. Anyways, I mean, it's on Marginal Revolution, right? But this is the book they're promoting. Yada yada. The first one, a Chad Firefinch. That's kind of a cool name. Some of these pictures are pretty cool. Screaming Cowbird. I thought that was a really good one. That was only number 99. Happy Wren. Yeah, Happy Wren. Middle American Leaf Tosser. I liked that one. Then come on down. So sorry if you're looking at the screen. Close your eyes, be. So their number one was the mallard. The number one bird name is the mallard? Really? You had Mid-American leaf tosser and you choose mallard out of the whole world? I don't know about that one. The Plains Wanderer, that's kind of a fun one. Super Tramp Fantail, way better than mallard, way better. So, anyways, that's a fun little look see. Disagree with mallard is number one. Definitely do not agree. That was our 100 greatest bird names of all time. And I wonder what their methodological thing for that. Method accounting, 52,019 puffins. And so I read this one, and the yeah, blue-footed boobies are a great bird name. They definitely need to be on that list. I don't know if they were. I didn't read through the entire list. That's a lot of bird names. Um, but I do like a good blue-footed booby. Yep. So they were counting puffins, and I was like, okay, well, what's your methodology? And basically, divided into 7 sectors, and then they use binoculars to count all the birds in that sector. And I'm like, well, how do you know if one's taking off or one's landing? Like, they didn't go into like the art of the science, and I was really hoping they would go into that. So I was disappointed with that one. Pretty disappointed with that article. Luggage tag switch scheme involves flights from Canada to countries where drug smuggling can carry death penalty. Didn't really interest me, so I didn't click on it. Pet Sounds at 60 years old. I'm guessing that's the Beach Boys album. And how cowboy culture remade Brazil. Again, didn't really think India's GDP figures okay after all question mark. Hmm. Uh, it's Financial Times, so it's going to be gated, so I didn't click on it. Plans released for a 16 billion mile long ship capable of carrying 80,000 people. Now, this one was crazy. Um, Here it is. And here's the little video they do. It's going to be complete with a little uh, indoor stadium and a concert hall. and all these things. A sports bar, of course, you got to have gambling. A mile long, 2 year voyage. They say it's going to go 2 years around the world. And man, I don't know how I feel about this. I kind of feel like it's like an arc, like they're building, like, why else would you have something like this? Like, they have like a whole canal within the canal, like trans system. Um, like, I feel like it's a ploy to build an arc. Um, Freedom Ship would be home to 50,000 people with space, 10,000 tourists, and 20,000 crew. Okay, so it says capable of carrying 80,000. It's going to be home to 50,000, but 10,000 a tourist and 20,000 a crew. So 50,000 like live on it full time, and then 10,000 are tourists that come and go, and 20,000 are crew members. I feel like there's a lot of governance and social dynamics there that are going to go on that they're going to need to really hammer out and figure out how all that's going to work. I do not see this happening. I do not see this as ever being made, and if it is, I feel like it's a disaster, like literal disaster, like Titanic style thing waiting to happen. But interesting, interesting nonetheless. Um, Richard Feynman's formula for the best holiday restaurant. So basically, if you have a set of days to be somewhere, um, you're going. He recommends, first day you're going to set your bar is to, like, if this is the best restaurant, then whatever that best restaurant is, then you're going to keep going back and back and back. Great for a cult. Yeah, the big giant ship. Yeah, great for a cult. Um, and but then as your time in that city goes by and you get closer to leaving, then your standards need to fall until you find that one that you want to keep going back. And um, Tyler criticizes it, rightfully so. He thinks it's a pretty pessimistic approach to the problem. Most locales, you should be able to find lots of very good restaurants. So if you find a quality place early on, do not return to it. Rather, keep looking for more. In fact, feeling emboldened by your early success. So Tyler takes a kind of opposite, a contrarian economic perspective on it. But I think Tyler's right. I, I go to a place not to keep going back to the same restaurant over and over again. Like, if I'm visiting a city, I'm going to try as many different restaurants and eatery places as I can. Like, that seems weird to me that you would buy, if you found a place that was of high enough quality, you would keep going back to it if you're visiting a place. Um, Senses the Ponder. We got here, 2019, 150,000 people working in autism therapy. 6 years later, there were 654,000. More than the number of people working in mining and logging or telecommunications or the U.S. Postal Service. This is a crazy, crazy stat. Um, what is that? Where's my calculator? All right, my calculator. So that's, I don't know if you can see my calculator. You can't see my calculator, so it doesn't matter where I put it. Um, so 50,000, 654,000, 654,000. Right, and then subtract a little back. So that's almost 500,000 have been added. 500,000 jobs in autism therapy has been added um, in the last 6 years. So that's a little under. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going, Olson?
We're looking at this. Census the Ponder one here. It says in 2019 there were 150,000 people working in autism therapy, And then 6 years later, there were 654,000, more than the number of people working in mining and logging or telecommunications or the US Postal Service. And I did a quick calculation. That was over 500,000 increase in 6 years.
I how much is that insurance changes in insurance policies that
Mm,
I would wonder if there's a policy change that sort of enabled it.
mhm.
I
Yeah, that's a good point.
then
Did
there's
did
diagnosis rates, like I don't know, that's I have very complicated thoughts on autism.
Hey, why not? Yeah.
It
But I just think that's crazy, like, over 6 years, that's a huge increase, like, in 6 years, 500,000. I don't know, like, what would be a comparable industry that would have that kind of growth in 6 years, the last 6 years?
as a percentage, probably really hard to find. I mean, just elder care's through the roof, though.
Yeah, holy cares, that's a good one too.
I,
Yeah.
I, I mean, that would show up in the social, what is it? Social services component of
Mhm,
the labor breakdown. So it may
mhm.
be clustered with elder care. So I may not be able to distinguish those two. Um,
Oh, okay.
anyway, sorry. This is data I look at a lot.
No,
Um,
that's great. This is what I'm wanting. This is exactly what, yeah, this is perfect.
so
Yeah.
so no, I mean, but the autism, it's the other thing is there could be favorable coding, and there
Mhm.
could be a recoding that happened that
Mm,
is now redistributing it. So either we think a lot more people are autistic and getting care, or it's probably a technical thing.
mhm,
So I'm going to put my first bet on something technical, either in the insurance or the coding.
mhm. Yeah.
Um, that's super cynical, but you work with data long enough, and
Yeah. No, that's not that's a great, that's an excellent point, right? Yeah. Um, I wonder, like you said, I think it probably is a increase. There probably were a couple of states, maybe say California, Texas, and a couple other high population ones where something changed either in the coding or like I know in Arkansas, like if you get certain meet certain criteria, the state will pay for the care, and so I'm wondering if that happened in other states as well.
it. I mean, how this is like gets to a deeper question. How do you audit the care standard for that?
Hmm.
Um, obviously, it's really helpful to have an additional caretaker for a marginal a marginal case,
Hmm.
um, just like for all sorts of reasons. Um, and there's judgment in the diagnosis, and then there's a huge dollar amount associated with the layout associated with the diagnosis.
Hmm.
And then how do you go about and audit it and then tell a bunch of parents like, oh, your kid's not really that autistic, we should be paying for less. um
Yeah,
I
that's true.
sorry, I
No,
topics you
that's a good
probably
point.
shouldn't ask me about.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, seeking genuine said she wants to hear your ideas on autism, but I'm like, I also don't want to get canceled.
I,
Your YouTube
yeah,
taken down.
I I mean, we Yeah, I would just say there's a combination of cultural factors and diagnoses, and like how and perceptive factors where the same set of traits are going to be handled, and then how they are handled is reinforcing. So you get these loops
Hmm.
of, if somebody perceives themselves as a certain way, they're going to relate to themselves a certain way, and then you're going to loop. And
Hmm.
also with caretakers. And so I am not a psychologist, but the endogeneity of the diagnosis and the behavioral effects makes me uncertain about what's happening causally over
Hmm.
time. Does that make
Hmm.
sense, Olson?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was it
Um,
PG enough?
I think it was. I think it was technical enough that it was yeah, PG. Yeah.
uh, if you've ever been to a math department, it's like the entire department, at least where I did math.
Hmm.
And
Right.
so I
Yeah.
don't know. And all those people seem to be okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, and I think yeah,
I'm gonna
the
close
idea
my
of
eyes.
neurodivergency is kind of a broader idea. I think that's where it kind of helps instead of just saying autism, just kind of like they see the world a little bit differently, and the the way their brains process and think is slightly outside the two standard deviations of normal.
I, and how does one norm these things
Hmm.
cross culturally and over time?
Hmm.
It's I that's confusing to me.
Hmm.
All right, sorry. I think I'm getting a pizza delivered, so just a second.
Sure, no worries. Get a pizza. Stay the side eye. And I have so many questions too. And yes, it's been very confused by modern society. It's been mixed with misleading data and information. Some of it's misleading, and I think some of it's genuine. Um, but again, it's just questions of how do we calculate those things? What are the incentives? Um, I have a nephew who's definitely on a neurodivergent spectrum. Um, he was very, um, and so it's not just like in a different math one, but then at the same time, you have other people that are not like him. Like he will most likely need somebody to live with him most of his life. And so kind of how do you compare that to then somebody like you were saying in your math departments, that's kind of like oh so
Yeah, I so if I'm doing a lot of math, I start to lose verbal skills.
hmm.
Like I struggle to get back to talking if I've been doing like linear algebra for 4 hours.
Hmm.
Um, did you do an econ PhD?
No.
Also, no. All right. Um, it's not a sane feat.
Oh no, it doesn't seem like one. That's why I never did it.
it's not. Uh, and I don't. I and so I really struggle with like seeing in myself how different activities are really changing my brain.
Mhm.
What obviously there are going to be people who are or more indifferent. They're going to have more extreme versions of the same thing.
Mhm.
But if I can go like nonverbal for 45 minutes after being into deep think and math, like that's weird. Um,
Yeah.
and that's, I don't know, maybe that's, I'm curious if other people have had that experience sort of on the, if
Hmm.
you're if you're doing long things in a nonverbal space, does that impact your ability to transition out? Um,
Hmm.
and that's all right.
I
But maybe
find I
social.
find maybe it's not nonverbal, but I have a difficult time transitioning back into social interactions if I've been driving for like, 6 or 7 hours. Like it's hard for me to like engage with other people and look
I
at them normally and stuff.
no, I think that seems like a similar phenomenon. Yeah, it's intense focus within a specific domain will then just turn off other domains.
Mhm. Hmm.
Oh well. All right, I'm not a psychologist, so I will
Yeah.
just move on.
No, that's an interesting thing like that I think could be studied is like after highly focused attention to something, you know, are different parts of your brain then more reactivated. So like they've done studies where if like somebody has like they lose a sense like vision or they lose an arm or something, like the parts of that brain that used to do that, it doesn't turn off. It actually just gets taken over by other parts of the brain and other senses. And then it's like, so I wonder if different modalities of thinking does the kind of a similar thing.
And, or if there's cross functionality,
Hmm.
the emphasis on one form of the functionality makes it slow to revert to the other function.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Or
something like
yeah, or at some point when you were working hard on math, your brain required it's like, hey, we need extra compute, and it slowly worked into your verbal area. And so like that, like you said, there's cross functionality with there with those neurons, but then when you're done with the math part, it's slow to like reboot that verbal part.
it, and that would make sense because the verbal function is that sort of that narrative verbal function is going to be highly related to your linguistics, but your
Mhm.
linguistics are going to become almost computational. Not
Mhm.
computational, it's probably like legit. Yeah, just sort of proof based logic sort of mindset. All right,
Yeah.
plumb those depths. But no, that was. And then you wonder why you walk around the math department and everyone's acting kind of weird.
I uh, I never assumed they were acting weird. I just kind of like it's like that's normal for them. um So, all right, moving on. That was a good discussion. I like that. That was good. All right, thanks for giving me your thoughts on that. This one was kind of interesting, and I was hoping someone would come on to help explain it to me. All right, so it says consent-based laws and aggregate fertility, and I kind of have a lot of questions on their methodology in this. But it says this paper examines how expanding the legal definition of sexual assault affects fertility and sexual behavior using a panel of European countries. I find that switching to tacit, consent based legislation reduces fertility by about 4% relative to the mean. So, tacit, that means you have to specifically ask, right? That's what I'm understanding that?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Okay. So, and then he's saying that that reduces it relative to the mean by 4%. This effect
Yes.
is driven by a decrease in couple formation and an increase in abortion rates. So, what would tacit consent have to do with abortion rates?
The first part makes sense. The I can definitely like, so basically you're punishing coupling. You're punishing if there's a misunder the probability of being punished for a misunderstanding goes up.
Right.
Now, this is all right. First, I'm going to say there's people who are sexually assaulting people, and those people should be discouraged socially and legally.
Mhm.
However, there's like three cases that sort of one needs to consider, which is I have or four cases. I have good intent. It's perceived as sexual assault. I have bad intent. It's perceived as sexual assault. Anyway, so you do a matrix
Yeah.
there, and really the punishment on the misunderstanding segment of that matrix is going to be more punitive.
Yeah.
Therefore, you are going to require a much higher, either a much higher probability of a successful match, or just a higher payout from matching in
Hmm.
order to couple, or to attempt to couple. So there's fewer attempts to couple, there's
Hmm.
fewer couples that result.
Yeah. Yeah. That made sense to me too.
All right, so I'm total math brain tonight, so
Sure. Sure.
this is where we're at today.
Awesome.
All right, so how do we get to abortion from there?
Yeah. How do you get to abortion from there?
I mean, that logic would just tell you that there's probably fewer couple acts of coupling. I think it would give a permission structure. Maybe it's providing a permission structure to assess more marginal marginal interactions, we'll call them, as negative. Therefore, if they're assigned as negative, the outcome that culture would provide is, well, it's a negative thing, you shouldn't have the baby. So I think maybe it's reclassifying marginal cases more likely as sexual assault, and therefore
Oh,
by doing so then that increases the probability of abortion. Does that make sense?
maybe. Because I feel like it would have the opposite effect, right? Like, I feel like if you have more coupling of people who are consenting, then there you have more likelihood of mutually agreeing, you know, agreeing partners, right? So it's like if 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 a child was conceived in that situation, then
i i, I think the way to the anyway, I don't know if this is correct,
sure.
but like there's three cases. There's the bad case where um there's a bad case where there's sexual assault and culture would say abort. I would have more nuanced views on that. Actually, I would
Mhm.
just oppose it, but that's another story.
Yeah, yeah. Why don't we hit
Uh,
all the rails?
but just for the but then the that's but then there's the good case, and the good case is going to be okay.
Mhm.
That's not going to change. It's the marginal cases where consent is ambiguous, and if culture and law are saying, well, if it was ambiguous, then the courts are saying, well, this you consented, and then now the woman, and then like people accept that and they say, oh yeah, no, this is a decision I made, I should take account for it.
Mhm.
Versus if the law is saying there wasn't tacit consent, now the woman in her mind was saying, I was sexually assaulted, I shouldn't carry the child of a sexual assault,
Mm.
even though it's the same act. The act of categorization sort of shifts the perspective.
Yeah. Huh.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I repeated the same thing twice, and
sure. Yeah, and I see what you're saying. Like it's you're saying like by making the tacit consent a thing, then if something unplanned happens out of that, then there's more the stigma of like, well, why was that not stopped? And so then there's less likely to see that carried to fruition.
by calling it sexual assault, you're permissioning abortion.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's
I don't know if
interesting
that's real. That's just
how you
I
make
don't know.
sense of it. Yeah.
I'm curious what the study says.
Yeah. So it continues. Supporting evidence is consistent with a behavioral channel in which more risk-averse individuals withdraw from the dating. That's what we were talking about. That was the
Yep.
initial one. And partner markets following the reform, altering the composition of those who remain active toward a pool that is less precautionary. Consistent with this compositional shift, contraceptive use rises among younger women but declines among older age groups, while condom use falls among young men. Finally, an analysis of appeals courts' verdicts in Sweden following the adoption of consent based legislation shows a decline in unanimous guilty verdicts, indicating challenges in assessing tacit consent. These results are consistent with a simple framework in which heterogeneity and risk perceptions and precautionary behavior in dating and partner markets, including reduced participation by some individuals, helps explain the observed decline in fertility following the reform. So
Okay.
maybe the fact that the more cautionary people who didn't want to have a mistaken like um, consent, like a misunderstanding and consent, have withdrawn themselves, and so then all that's left are the more adventurous people who are willing to do that. And then
Yeah, the good guys stay home.
yeah, and so then you're getting so then
And so
it's a,
you so more of the matches are between bad type guys.
mhm, right. And so I guess that makes sense. It doesn't say it's an increase in abortion; it's just increase in abortion rates. So per pregnancy abortion. So I guess that makes sense. And I was thinking of total abortions.
Yeah. All right. No, that
All right.
so my earlier theory is wrong.
But still, it's still fun to, yeah, good thinking. All right, next one. This was another one I was having trouble with. It says big if true. Several important questions, such as the possibility of debt rollover without primary surpluses, turn on whether the present value of the aggregate endowment is finite, whether the economic growth rate under the risk neutral measure lies below the risk free rate. Okay, so what's what's the risk free rate? I'm not familiar with that term.
All right. We're getting too close to my work.
Oh, okay. We can move
Well,
on if you want. We can
well,
totally move
I'll
on
see
because
if
there's
I
other
can
stuff.
handle it without like
No worries.
getting into. All right. So the risk-free rate is the. All right. Can you read the paragraph? I'm sorry. Can you read
Sure.
it again? Sure. Just so I can zoom in on it.
Yeah. Several important questions, such as the possibility of debt rollover without primary surpluses, turn on whether present value of aggregate endowment is finite. Example, whether the economic growth rate under the risk neutral measure lies below the risk free rate. It is tempting to argue that the endowment must be finitely valued, since there exists finitely valued non depreciating assets whose cash flows are counter integrated with aggregate output. This paper shows why the argument is incorrect. A remarkable historical episode in which French government bonds were indexed to aggregate growth allows indirect measurement of the risk adjusted growth rate, which is found to exceed the risk free rate.
All right, that's a doozy.
So we can move on if that's too
No,
doozy.
no. All right. No, this is like there's all right. I want to now. I have to actually have to read this paper. Um.
It's by Stravos Panagius. It's a MBR risk-free rate, growth rate.
All right.
Let's see if I could
Yeah.
zoom
No.
in here on that.
No. I don't know if we can
There
read
you
it
go.
live, but I think this is something we. Um. Yeah. No. All right. So let's just like. So there's questions about how we price bonds,
Hmm.
um, and there's sort of a connection between what your interest rates are and then what the stabilized interest rates yeah what your interest rates are in the growth of the economy, and there's sort of like some fixed points there,
Right.
and so basically he's making an argument that cash flows, all right, non-depreciating assets, that cash flows are co-integrated with aggregate output. So basically he's saying if you have a bond where the bond pays basically nominal GDP,
Hmm.
um, or maybe that's what he's not saying. It's tempting to argue that the endowment must be finite valued since there exist finitely valued non-depreciating assets whose cash flows are co-integrated with the aggregate. So basically, all right, bonds are associated with the aggregate rate, therefore we have to say they're finitely valued. Um, the paper shows why this is incorrect. So all right, let's leave this one alone. I'd have to read the paper, and it just it seems like there's probably something fishy in the assumptions, and I don't
Okay.
know what it is without like this
Sure.
is a that's a good 3 hour dive into me trying to understand all the assumptions, which is
All right.
not fun.
So
Not
in a
fun
couple of
for
weeks, we,
I
expect a report back.
yeah, well, it's
Just kidding. You don't have to.
no, I mean I think there's a I, it seems like there's an exceptional case that he found and he's writing a paper.
Hmm.
Um, uh, these things don't generally hold up to more robust or broader sets of situations. So
Hmm.
it's probably someone who's just trying to publish. That's generally
Sure.
where
Okay.
I'd go with this. But
Yeah.
I'll probably read it through because I'm curious what he found. And honestly,
Yeah.
like interest rates are my day job, so
Right.
I
Yeah.
need I need to read on that, and I haven't read that paper.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why Tyler was saying big if true, because he's
Yeah,
like,
and
if it's
if
true,
true means it's probably false. Uh,
if true's carrying a lot of weight in that.
yeah, I mean,
All right. So next
okay.
one. This was a U.S. exports intelligence. This is Alex. He always writes the longer articles on here. Um, but he pointed out that most of Americans work in the service sector, and that's what's being exported, right? And so he used the example of Netflix. Brazilian retailer buys Microsoft cloud products. J.P. Morgan has a
Yep,
financial deal in London. Example,
yep.
consulting
That's
firms. And so I just thought this was interesting. It makes complete sense, but it's just something I didn't necessarily think about that
Oh yeah,
our services. And he points out that a lot of the people working in the U.S. service export industry is higher than the U.S. manufacturing export industry. And so he says it's 8.9 million Americans work in U.S. service exports, where U.S. manufacturing exports support 2.2 million. Like, that's interesting.
that checks out. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
not that surprising. I
mhm,
mean, I'm gonna butcher the numbers, but I'm like right now we're at 15-ish% in manufacturing construction of employment,
mhm,
and so the overwhelming share of the economy, like 80% plus. Well, I'll have to check my numbers. I haven't done this particular calculation recently, but
yeah,
yeah, overwhelming percentage is in services, and yeah, I think financial services, consulting services, media, tech, all those. It's that's where the economy is, where American wealth is, and obviously that's what we're exporting. I don't
yeah,
think it doesn't serve for a good visual, but this
mhm,
is pretty. It's pretty obvious. I mean, I look at the import export stuff most most months, um,
mhm,
and this this is not surprising. So it's funny what people don't realize, I guess.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It checks out. It completely checks out, but it's one of those things like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about it, but it makes sense.
I mean, what does that mean for like the AI thing, though? Um,
Mhm,
what that is going to will that mean we decrease our exports because foreign countries will have some of these services more domestically? Like it's all the sector, a lot of the sectors that we export are like the heavy AI impact sectors.
mhm,
Um, so we and that could actually reduce our reduce our exports substantially, assuming we're
mhm,
not just exporting AI services,
mhm.
which
Might be.
is more likely. The
Well,
geopolitics of AI is enticing. Um,
yeah, yeah, that is. Yeah. Do you think? I mean, part of the AI race obviously is geopolitical, and they're like, oh, we got to beat China there. Is part of it? I was wondering, like, is the unstated issue behind that more an issue of, right,
oh,
kind of like a mad issue where it's like mutually assured destruction. So we can't let China get too far ahead of us, and they can't let us get too far ahead of them, because if one has an overpowering AI, then our computer systems, right? We could design an AI to attack and then defend against them in a situation.
I I think that's probably the case. Um, I think we want to win that. I mean, I think both sides actually want to win that. Um, it's going to. I don't know if you saw the. Oh, who was it? It was Viveki and Jonathan and oh, I can picture him. Um, who hosted? Who's transfigured?
Oh,
Help me out.
uh, Sam, was it Sam?
Sam. Yeah, Sam Tiedemann. Sorry, Sam. Uh, so I think Sam's point on software being the place where we are most certainly going to get sort of this huge, huge capacity increase to just to write software quickly. Um,
Mhm.
I think that undermines all that by itself is enough to create all of these security concerns.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm not going to enumerate all of them because I don't want to get all depressed. Uh, but I I have a list.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a long list.
it's an extensive list. It's not a fun list. Um, so so there's that. But then there's also just like pure good night, Daring Hobbit. Uh, no, there's just the pure economic motives. If you're the one who creates the cyber worker, that I am, instead of paying someone 70K to do an office job, I am paying this agent 15K.
Mhm.
Um, that's extraordinary. That's some win-win there. And I mean, I'm just gonna go depressing on this one. Like your employer doesn't need to tell you that it's tracking all of your actions for 3 months, reading all of your emails, looking at all the documents you're producing. And behind the scenes, an AI learning them alongside you, and and sort of mimicking and then trying to predict and replicate. And then 3 months later, they turn you off and they turn the AI on. Um,
Yeah,
like
I,
that's
I, w-
not far fetched.
I was in an entry level accounting job for a year and a half or so, and I tried to convince the company. I'm like, 80% of this job can be automated. You just need to invest in some. And this was before like the huge breakthrough revolutions, more recently. And I'm like, you could, you just need to invest, but they didn't want to because they were afraid of like the security vulnerabilities and stuff. And I'm like, all right, I'll keep doing it, but I'm telling you, you can automate my job.
I and at some level, why are people doing jobs that are so dumb that there's no wisdom and there's no like I think John Vervaeke is right that like no, these machines are not deep purposeful entities, but there's enough jobs where I can replicate maybe 90% of it and then give the other 10% to someone who's actually just making meaningful decisions all day. Um, so I think that's known, and I think the how many how many workers are there that fall into that category? Many million, several million. We'll call it 2 or 3 million, and then we're
I think
saving
that's
50K
conservative.
on
Yeah.
yeah we're saving 50K on each of them, and there's just billions of dollars in annual profit from that product. Just completely lowballing it. So
Do
and
you
like
think?
in
Do you
micro,
think these added? Do you think these added savings and because what I'm interested to see is the trickle down effect into medium and small size companies. I think like with the layoff of all these, with a lot of the software engineers and stuff from the big companies, I'd love to see like the effect. What effect is it happening? then on like your mid-size trucking company that then, has 100 to 200 trucks, and then could hire one or two software guys to come in and do some of that automation stuff, and then that frees up some capital. Does that then allow them to then hire some other trucks, or purchase new equipment? What's the knock-on effect of a being able to hire software people where they weren't able to hire software people because that was too expensive and they weren't available, and then b, the automation of some of those capital intensive office work that then allows for higher means of production outside.
I, and this is the race component. If you're the first one there, then you're going to get those effects. Sorry, I'm going to be on this porch spinning. Tell me if it's annoying.
No, that's
Um,
awesome. That's great.
you can
Oh,
see my half dying mesquite tree. Uh,
dude, that's like that sun. The sun's going down. It's the sunset. That's perfect. That's a perfect view right there. There you go. That's good stuff.
Arizona's beautiful. Um, so if you eliminate your office staff first, then you can undercut and gain market share.
Mhm.
If everybody undercuts, if everybody cuts staff, it isn't like the aggregate demand for trucking is going to increase. So there's definitely my sense is that there's an early mover advantage in a lot of these situations. And
Mhm.
so whoever, if you move too quickly, you're going to overpay and get bad tech. If you move too late, uh, you're going to be facing cost pressures as you're getting undercut by your competitors.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I don't know. There's, I think we're right now in the everybody's trying to figure out how can I effectively use this
Mhm.
before my competitor does.
Mhm.
And I, it's, I'm not going to solution the whole thing, like, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
go.
as easy as, oh, we're going to replace this with AI, but it may be now we can afford a proprietary system that does the job efficiently where before that was out of reach.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Things like that. It's more complicated in practice, but and this is where the this the acceleration meta crisis thing is kind of in in full movement
Mhm.
because companies are actively making these decisions today and rolling things out. Um, so it's not going to take that long before AI companies are demanding to pay sort of closer to cost than what the models cost, but also companies are sort of demanding the savings that they from the investments they're putting into these things. And you're going to actually start to see material economic impact outside of just the software space. So that's
Mhm.
my really gloomy Wednesday night take.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a little gloomy, but I mean, I feel like in a way it's always been the situation. Now it's just this is just accelerated like 10 or 100 times speed.
Yeah, yeah, I think
I mean, I remember my family owned a small business, and you know, uh, when I was real little, we used to allow people to charge, like have an account and do charge within the store charging and stuff. That's a big thing in agriculture.
yep.
And then we do statements every month. And when I was real little, it was all done by hand, and you had to have like 5 or 6 people in that office doing it. And then as I got older, they got more computer systems, and then there was only 3 or 4
What
people.
what was is that there's this what was it on Apple II? Shoot, I should remember this. They had the first spreadsheet program, and
Oh
basically they
yeah.
were just selling Apple IIs for the spreadsheet software. And somebody in comments can remind me what it was. Um,
You're assuming there's people in the comments.
no, I assume there's people in the comments. Yeah, there's no one in the comments. It's all right. We're just talking here, Elson.
Yeah, yeah, that happens.
That's all right. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, yeah. Well, yeah, no, the I mean, since we're talking about it, we might as well, like the capacity increase. People stop doing dumb things like spending all their time doing arithmetic, and they start, which I shouldn't say it's dumb things. Like all of our a lot of our earliest like Sumerian like clay tablets are people doing contract work and arithmetic for agricultural
Hmm.
purposes. Like this
Hmm.
is not trivial, but the fact that we can do this with much less effort is great. Um, the fact that I don't have to make comments about grammar is is great,
Hmm.
and I just it's a quick fix. I don't have to like chew out my people or do like hour-long editorials, edit edit resign. Anyway, so which is has happened in the past. Hopefully not chewing out my people, but definitely
Yeah.
hours of fixing people's grammar.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, yeah.
Learn
Anyways,
to use a comma.
and like my grammar isn't that great, but my gosh, the what you get in the math econ profession for writing. Uh, all right. Oh, I'm like, what's that shadow? It's the shadow of my phone. There we go. Yeah. Well, but there's going to be new products that come out of it, and it's really hard to see what the balance will be. All right, I'm derailing. Tell me
It's
what
all
we're
right.
talking about next, Olson.
All right. Next, we're not going to go through this whole thing. But I'm just point out Tyler Cowan is going to have a conversation with Tyler with Martha C. Nussbaum, and then and she wrote a thing on opera and political freedom, and looking at different operative works. And then I'm not sure how she was tying that in with political freedom again, but basically his critique, which is what I was kind of going to get at and then expand on, is he says part of her understanding of the opera, like Don Giovanni, um, was right. She put it purely as like a economic situation where the underclass females only liked Don because they were under economic. And he's like, well, they could have actually just really liked him, or he could have had charisma or something. And and it made me think, um, part of part of our crisis with modernity, and part of our crisis, with people have against like logic and reasoning, and those incorporating those almost exclusively, is that it seems like in a lot of these areas, like certain sciences and certain analysis, there's the need to infuse non-logical things as part of their analysis. And so with the infusion of non-logical, or deductive, like purely, Bayesian deduced reasoning, it then causes people to be like, hey, wait, what are you doing here? Like, that's not. And then they get angry at things like modernity because they're like, hey, you're trying to sneak in these non-logical things, you know. I think, you know, like we look at the health profession and the virus that shall not be named. And for a long time, they're like, hey, we got to distance, we got to do all these things. But then when there were these protests of a certain type, they're like, no, you could go out and go to those protests where people are all crammed together. And it's not to say the protests weren't legit or whatever. It's not a critique of the protests. It's just to say that all of a sudden, logically, they changed their minds of what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable. And you see that, and that's basically his critique here of what she's, you know, she's only being able to critique these operas from a certain perspective and not really taking into account like the whole gamut of human interactions. I think that's kind of really hurt the sciences and academic professions because other things were being snuck in, and now people are being like, okay, now I'm going to not necessarily trust them, and we're going to look to have more wooey explanations to everything. I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I, I there's, I mean, there's a complete lack of frame right now, or there's a frame fragmentation,
Hmm.
and it's near impossible to talk across the frames because like the rationality, there's implicit assumptions to the rationality, and which you need to start with a frame,
Hmm.
uh, some sort of common priors.
Hmm.
Otherwise, it's just not, you're not going to update to anywhere near the same space, or
Hmm.
not going to deduce to the same thing. Um, I think there is, hopefully, no, I'm just projecting probably, but for me, there's an increasing realization that there is a real fragmentation of frames, and people are actually viewing the world in very, very different ways.
Hmm.
Um, so I I read the title of a Malcolm and Simone video to some of my workers. We're talking about frames and like how so like what's the context? We're developing surveys,
Hmm.
um,
That's
and
hard.
yeah, no, developing surveys is really hard. And part of it is I was like telling going into it, a lot of people are just going to read their political frame into the survey and they're going to respond in a manner which is just going to regurgitate their politics. And we're going to have to design the questions as best as possible as to avoid that particular issue. But then it's like, but then we have this frame fragmentation issue where there was 16,000 people who watched some Malcolm and Simone video on with like a title that would horrify every HR department. Uh,
Yeah.
and, and so and that's for me. And so that like there's and that's just one is like, and so it's going around and sort of just talking about, all right, what's your media and how is that impacting you? And then just so that we understand that, like, all right, this is what we're dealing with the survey design. There's obviously some big stuff, but then just like the media environment's really weird. So where are we going with all this? there's an increasing realization that we're just talking past each other, and it's best to keep to your own sect if you're or your tribe if you really want to communicate, because you can't communicate with those other people
Mhm.
like Biddle and PVK. Like it, did you watch that?
Which one's Biddle?
Uh,
Oh, Joe, the Orthodox
who's
guy.
Craig? No, Craig Biddle. He was the rationalist.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He's done. Yeah, they've done like two of those. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like they they can barely talk to each other. I mean, it's it's so my favorite was like he Craig's really frustrated, and he's like, "Well, can you tell me why?" And finally, I'm just going to ask you directly. Like, can you tell me why you believe God exists? And then PVK was like, he thought for a second, and he said, "Because the sun comes up in the morning." And then Craig's like, "That's a complete non sequitur. Why would it be? Why? Why would? Why would the sun coming up in the morning have anything to do with God's existence?"
Yeah.
And and then Paul came back and said, "You didn't. You asked why I believe God exists." And I think me coming from like Camp PVK, I immediately saw that as sort of this brilliant argument from order that sort of there's a lot implied in that answer. It wasn't a trivial answer. On the other
Yeah.
hand, it was also saying I have this view of the world with God, and every time I see order in the cosmos, it reinforces that vision.
Hmm.
Something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And Greg's like, "You're a crazy person. How this doesn't even make any sense." Uh, and so we're we're like in pure so like rationality or this rational dialogue doesn't make any sense if we have no common frame.
Yeah.
And so I just think we have fragmented frames, and I think but that's fine because for most of history we had fragmented frames, and we worshiped one way in our village and worshiped slightly differently in the village down the road, and we traded and sort of lived mostly in our I mean it wasn't that isolated. People traveled a lot in the Bronze Age, but
Hmm.
there
Till it
was
collapsed.
until it then it was just the sea people traveling. No, all right, it isn't a good conversation unless we bring up the sea people. But but I think there's a return like I don't know. Medieval Germany was basically city states, and there was conversation across them, but there were many multiple loci of centrality, and then and that was fine. And now we're kind of getting yeah, we're getting back to that in one way. I don't
I
know.
mean,
I
in
have
one
a
way it was fine.
save me.
In one way it was fine, but just a little pushback on that. Like the history of Europe is littered with pointless and meaningless wars, border disputes between city states and fiefdoms for all sorts of crazy stuff.
I don't know. I think all of the disputes between like Milan and Venice were well founded and well thought out. No,
I didn't know I was gonna you know
no,
of all
touche.
the
No, you're right.
controversial things like the
No,
Milan
no.
Venice
I'm just no. I'm saying
wars
because we're
wars
also
of aggression pro.
I'm Team Venice. They had a strong republic for how many 700, 800 years. Uh,
Yeah.
so put me on the side of the Doge. Uh, no,
uh,
no, yeah, no. I would. I guess like stated differently, I think humanity can exist with the fragmentation, but there's a lot of cross border conflicts. Um,
yeah.
per, as evident throughout the globe today.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I I think this is like the Jordan Hall thing. Maybe I'm just like completely misinterpreting Jordan Hall, but the combination of the fragmented culture, the acceleration of the technology, um, which is an accelerant of fragmentation, and that exasperates a whole bunch of other things. Um, does the center hold? And I this is why I talk about the universal basic institution stuff, because if the center doesn't hold, we need to double down on those first layer of institutions that
Mhm.
sort of preserve us.
And
Are
what
not
would it
free.
take? I guess the corollary is that is like what would it take for the center to hold? Like is the cost worth holding the center?
I mean, I think you would. This is like the in retrospect, it's always a great man, but maybe it's the times that creates the great man.
Mhm.
Um, so, how did Ukraine not totally collapse in the first few weeks of the Russian invasion?
Yeah.
Um, they had a leader, their people pulled together around their leader, and everyone kind of did the thing and took the punch, and and thousands of people died. But um, yeah, I mean, I think in retrospect, you would need to have a leader that is able to reform some of the central institutions as to allow for greater flexibility at the fragmented level, and to create sort of a new regime of coherence. Um, I don't. So I was I pitched at one of Paul's estuaries. This is the in person estuary. What was it? It was where's the Illuminati when we need them? Oh,
Those Venetian bankers,
yeah, the Phoenician Republic. We need where's that now?
the Medicis. Yeah.
I Catholic Church can do without the Medicis. Yeah, that's something that'll get me canceled. No, so, yeah, no, but I think there's this like there's this winsome fantasy that there's the a smarter class of connected people that have the interest of holding the center, and
Mm,
the and I jokingly call it the Illuminati.
mhm.
This is like not saying, oh, the continuation of some ancient, you know,
Right.
uh
Yeah.
but it's like we it's the mythos of these of our betters who are going to save the center for us,
Mm,
um and we know who all those people should be
mhm,
and who have like the centrality to actually do something, and I don't know if they're interested.
mhm, mhm,
Like the amount of dollars being spent by five different institutions on AI infrastructure right now is is insane. I don't know. Was it like
mhm.
300 billion, something like that?
If I thought it was more, yeah.
I've but yeah, no, I'd have to go read numbers, but it's but like we're up. The projections for 2027 are up almost 100% from like 6 months ago, a year ago. So the expected growth is even faster as we sort of approach. Um,
Mhm,
and so anyway, and it's how many people are actually controlling that spend.
mhm,
It's a a group of people that is a pretty small number.
mhm,
Um, anyway, so yeah, how does the center hold? Well, those people need to realize that they're the center and that they need the institutional center to hold, and they need to invest in those institutions and um, allow those institutions to allow the central government institutions to tame them in order to give legitimacy to the central government institutions again, if that makes
mm,
sense.
mm,
Because now you have like four or five companies that are incredibly powerful at a global state scale,
mhm,
um, where their power sort of power, I hate that word, where their causal influence matches the U.S. government on many dimensions.
mhm, mhm,
So what do we do about that? And then this is
mhm.
not the first time this has happened. You've had like
Right.
this is not new, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
was
like
thinking of, like, the Gilded Age, yeah,
yeah,
Carnegie and the railroad barons.
and they built infrastructure and it made America more amazing.
Mhm,
Um, but they also set up the Federal Reserve. I mean, that was J.P. Morgan and friends, but
mhm,
they realized that they needed to cede some power in order to sustain its the central order.
mhm.
Um, anyway, yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know. That's a hard question, but I guess that's where I'd have to go with it.
and when you don't have that and the center doesn't hold, you get places like oops, Turkmenistan.
Turkmenistan.
They had he had something about Turkmenistan. The Stan brothers always fascinate me. Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan.
I
Yeah,
I have not read up on all of my stands. Um, so
it's
mostly,
beautiful area. Highly fragmented and uh, not not very cohesive. Um,
I,
so
I
very poor.
I was having this conversation about with a colleague on like really how many of the the geographic nation states on the globe actually are nation states
Mm,
that is control their border, have
mm,
uh, can exercise some level of taxation on their populations. um, I- the count seems all pretty darn low. It was the conversation was centered around India, and is India really uh, can India control its own borders? Is it cohesive as a it's like should our map really show India? I mean, obviously they have a central government. The question is how effective is it?
mm.
And I would yeah, I think there's more. Yeah, I'm gonna mess it up. Turkmenistan's than there are New Mexico's or Arizona's.
Yeah, yeah. India's an interesting one. I feel like that one's more can be more closely associated with a nation state than some other ones.
Oh,
Like
there's definitely there's a continuum, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You look at some of the African countries that are just like the borders were completely by colonial powers that had no idea what they were doing. And you're like, this is. I feel like they would this the central or the African what's the union, the African Union or something like that. Like, I feel like if they got together and promised the people that were in power, hey, you're going to stay in power, but your borders are going to look a little different, and they just kind of like drew the borders more closely aligned to like the actual clans and people groups that are associated. I think that would help some.
Um, I I mean, I think what would happen if you were to do that is you would get so many nations that
Hmm.
it would it I mean, you would have the Balkans all the way across Central Africa,
Hmm.
um, which may be fine. That may be actually more functional, but um, yeah, maybe to dissolve it all and then have it reassemble as a confederacy of states or something
Hmm.
would be more functional. But no one who has a claim on the current lines wants to impose that. Yeah, but I mean, how do you feel? How do we feel about like Spain, where there's a there's a few different cultural groups? I mean, the Catalans, the Basque. Um, do we should we also split up Spain?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was there when the Catalonians voted to succeed, and Spain was like, nope. And that was with, I mean, that's been within 10 years. Like, that's
Yep.
and I have mixed feelings with Spain. We went there one time and we had a great time until the last or second to last night, and then my wife got violently ill. food poisoning. So kind of marred our Spain trip.
Uh, yes.
It was like on a
Well,
Sunday, and I had no idea like where to go to get like medicine or anything. Like,
oh yeah, because
oh,
all the pharmacies are closed, especially late on the Sunday. That
yeah.
yeah, I it's I mean yeah. So all right. This is a big aside, but uh, there's something really weird about the United States in that it was settled recently. It crossed like people move from Chicago to Phoenix with no issues really. I mean, minor cultural differences. Um, it's much more culturally contiguous than much smaller areas pretty much in every other part of the world.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know every other part of the world, but in a lot of places I've been, if you fly as far it is from Phoenix to Chicago, that's I don't know 3 hours. Um, that's you're going to be in vastly different cultural spaces. Um, Yet we are surprisingly culturally homogeneous across geographies within the
Mhm.
U.S. Um, and so this is weird, and this is so this sort of the fragmentation is political, cultural, and in some levels class. Um, so I guess class racial, um,
And urban, rural.
urban, rural, but even within the urban it's so there's a bunch of fragmentation but it's not geographical. I mean if it's geographical it's sort of this fractal geography of you don't get a clean cut difference across the nation, but within each metro you sort of get these metro and surrounding regions it's you get these differentiations that are kind of mirror each other from like if you're living an hour and a half outside of the Bay Area, you probably have more in common with someone living an hour and half outside of Chicago than you would someone in the center of the city, if that makes sense.
I lived an hour and a half outside of the Bay Area. I grew up there.
All right, so it's you have it's that rural urban split, and what do you think of my thesis? That was a strong thesis or hypothesis.
Oh, I thought it was uh, kind of fragmented. Ha. um, yeah, I think yeah. So you do have these different splits, and I think one split that you didn't mention that I think is actually maybe more powerful is informational split.
Yeah,
Um, and where people are getting information. I think that's a big thing.
it's and some of that's social, but you can get people in similar social economic scenario situations that have very different ideological or their information is from very different places there for their ideology. Right,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just going in circles here so I'll stop.
But I'm
Yeah,
just
you're right.
like because part of it is like I've seen, you know, like marriages or whatever. I've had friends and the husband gets their information from one spot and the wife gets it from, the husband get it doesn't even have to be like that different of information, just like the modality, right? Husband gets it from YouTube and the wife gets it from Instagram. And
Yep.
then you see like they start ideologies start to split, and you're like, huh, that's interesting.
It's I think that's pervasive, especially couples my age. Yeah, but I think you don't take your feed too seriously.
Yeah, yeah. The person across the table is always more important than the feed.
Yeah. Anyway, no, it's weird. All right.
One last
Last
one
one.
for you. Then
All
I
right.
gotta call it quits.
No, it's late, so
They're finding this paper is finding suggests that aggregate value of total data of missing values is 1.5% of GDP. So they say that
missing
they value,
values. Oh,
or and then yeah, our findings suggest the aggregate value of data is about 1.5% of GDP. There you go.
so they're measuring a value of data, and then they're okay.
Yeah, thought that was interesting. At first, when I first read it, I was like, "Oh man, that's a lot." Then, as I've thought about that, I'm like, I feel like the value of data would be even more than that.
Is is data a stock or a flow? Should it be treated like capital or treated like income or production? Do they cover that? Eh,
I don't know.
all
How
right,
well they have to
investment in
capture
data.
value.
No, they're treating it like a flow. So they're saying the addition of new data should be basically a production factor.
Including the payment in modern economy. Consumption of barter data is also omitted from national accounts. We propose an output-based approach to measuring the missing value of data. We treat data as an asset. They're doing asset.
All right, yeah.
Measure its volume based on the quality of the firm's revenue forecast and androgynously determine its depreciation. We then capitalize the data value and explore what the measured GDP would be if the data were transacted similarly as a physical asset. Yeah, I would say it's more of a,
Yeah,
I think of it
data's
as a physical asset.
yeah, it's like a capital stock and your investment in the data is a flow. I mean, there's already a bunch of um intangible like intellectual property, IP, intangible
Yeah, that's what
assets.
I was thinking. That's what I was comparing it to.
It I I would want a secondary source of measure. So if there was a high value, if there's a firm where you know its value is really high and it's the data quality associated with the firm is very high, so they're making their money by data accumulation. So like CoStar or um Nexus Lexus, someone like
Hmm.
that,
Hmm.
then the I would I would sort of want to play out what what the methodology is. There is there a secondary way you can sort of estimate the value you of that firm from the intangibles, and is that not being captured in the data somewhere, in the
Hmm.
GDP data? Are we like leaving out those firms? I guess it's like where do they think this data is, um where it's not being captured? I
Hmm.
don't know. I'd have to like read the details of the paper, but I'm initially skeptical that the gap isn't being captured in the firm valuations.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, because yeah, with firms that are like that's the whole thing is they control data. Then isn't that already being valued into the price of that firm?
yeah, and it should be. And if the data is valuable, those firms should be getting paid for that, and it should show up on the income side. Um, Maybe it's being attributed to something not called data, but it feels like we may end up double counting unless
Mhm.
they take into account that, which I would need to actually read the paper to
Yeah,
determine.
I guess the only thing would be like if there's data that I personally possess that um, companies don't have, and it's not being monetized.
Yeah,
Right? So if there's unmined data, that's. But then how do you calculate unmined
it,
data?
and I mean, my wife painted beautiful murals on all the kids' walls in our house, uh, and they're thousands of dollars worth of value. Like, how much would I have had to pay for that on to get somebody to come in and paint those murals? That's thousands
Mhm,
of dollars. None of that was captured. It's just sort of home production. And GDP is a number. I mean, it's like
yeah, yeah.
it's like all right, yeah. There's a lot of things missing from GDP. I don't. I My concern would be if there was a major industry where you had data being accumulated and valued by the markets and we weren't able to capture that. If it's
Mhm,
like, yeah, there's a bunch of extra data sort of as an asset being accumulated in a lot of places, but it's not really generating any income yet, but maybe it will in the future. I
mm,
like I I'm So because let me restate this in a different way, and then I'll shut up. You have a production methodology and an income methodology, the
mhm,
GDP and the GNI,
mhm.
or GDI,
Yeah,
and your GDP and your GDI should equate. Um, if you did the
but
accounting right. So if
yeah, but they don't usually, right?
they don't usually, but we're not we're not widely off. So
Mm,
I mean, and if we have this issue, it's an issue on the GDP side, not on the GDI side.
mhm,
And so, if anything, it accounts for some of the missingness between the two accounting methodologies, and so maybe it's 1.5, maybe they're right, but that's sort of rounding error. That's a pretty typical sort of difference between GDP and GDI. So
mm.
it doesn't bother me. Is that
You're not bothered, and it's not
I mean,
nonplussed.
I think it doesn't change how I think about the economy. Does that
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
like
yeah, I agree. I agree. I was just trying to think of edge cases where you could have a firm or something that would have data that isn't being priced in yet. Like a startup maybe
but yeah, I,
that's
but you
getting,
get yeah,
LiDAR data or something.
if there's a large difference between sort of a revenue based projection of valuation and the market valuation, and you can attribute that to data accumulation. I, I guess I don't know of any stocks where it's like, oh, they're really mispriced until you account for the value of their data. and it seems like there'd be a smoking gun case where you don't understand they're accumulating really great data and they're going to be worth a lot someday. I think you hear a lot of tech stories, sort of like they're pre-revenue, they're still developing product, but rarely is that like a data accumulation story. And I'm happy to be proven wrong on that, but I struggle with that. And so whenever I review these papers, all right, so I'm really pragmatic, and but mostly because I'm doing this stuff for work. And it's like, okay, does this change how I think about?
Oh, that's it.
I should get off the phone and go pray.
Oh,
So
okay. Sorry.
no, this is good. Hopefully you enjoyed it. It was a fun conversation for me, and
Yeah.
I hope it was good for you, Olson.
Yeah. Yeah. This is what I've been hoping for. Yeah. Econ fun after dark. Right.
All right.
This is it.
We'll
All right. Go
do
pray.
it again in a few weeks. All right.
Have a good day.
Have a good day.
All right. See ya.